We're here today with Dr. Walter Allen. Today is Thursday, January 30th, 2014. And my name is Freda Giles. I am Associate Director of the Institute for African American Studies at the University of Georgia. Dr. Allen, we're pleased to have you here today. And if you would please begin by giving us your full name.
Walter Rudolph Allen, Sr.
Thank you. So let's begin by, I remember vividly, my husband and I had the honor of attending a dinner in your honor in 2008 where your students paid tribute to you as a musician, as an educator, and as a community activist. And so we'd like to talk a little bit about all three of those things today. Let's start with your early life. You were born in South Carolina. So could you talk a little bit about growing up and how, as a teenager, you became a musician?
Well, I was born in Allendale, South Carolina. It's a small town located south of Augusta. And I was one of 12 children. I don't even remember all of my brothers and sisters. It's quite a long history. But my parents were Mr. and Mrs. Lonnie and Florrie Allen. And I attended the public schools in Allendale. And of course, growing up, my dad was not an educator at all. In fact, my dad could not read or write. Yet he managed to take 12 kids along the way, and he did the best he could for all of us. What was the other question?
Well, when you were growing up, you told a story about finding a trumpet.
Oh, yeah.
And that's how you got into music. So could you tell that story?
I had a good friend who, his name was Tom Gill. And of course, he could come up with more things than you could imagine. And all of us were poor in the sense. Of course, no, we really didn't think we were poor, but we were, according to the standards of most people in the town, but we were. And Gill had a wood route. And every afternoon after school, he would have something going on, and he told me he wanted me to help him sell wood. And we would load the wood up on the wagon and take off. And then he had an old trumpet, and he said that the man wanted $25 for the trumpet. Of course, I never knew whether it was Gill's trumpet or where he got it from. I didn't ask any questions, and I couldn't play the trumpet anywhere. But I managed to work with the wood pile and cutting wood and stacking wood and putting it on the wagon till I made the $25. So Gil gave me the $25 and I went and bought a trumpet. I bought the trumpet that he was talking about. Of course, it was an old trumpet and had the valves where you could change it from A to a B flat instrument. And I really didn't know very much about it, but in the school, in the high school, which was called Allendale County Training School, and that was a school for blacks. Mm-hmm. The whites was the Allendale High School. And while there, I enrolled in the music class. There was a band director that we had in the school, and I talked with him about the trumpet and about teaching me how to play it, and he said, well, it's kind of an old beat-up trumpet, but I said, I don't have any money to straighten it out. We just had to play it as it was in its original position, So I did, and my band director got very angry with me sometimes because I wanted to change instruments all the time. I wanted to play the trumpet a week or two, and the next week or two I wanted to play something else. And he said, you got to stick with one instrument. Just got to stick with one instrument. Of course, I was glad I did that because later on in life I had learned to play before I left high school 3 or 4 different kinds of instruments. So it really paid off then. But we had a very, very good band. And the band director said, I'll give you some private lessons. And of course, he was not going to charge me, but he said, you're going to have to cut wood for me every afternoon and bring in the wood for me and have so we could keep warm in this house that we're in. And I did that to pay for the music lessons. But I got most of my lessons at school, but he would help me extra when I needed it. And I learned to play well enough that I was a member of the high school band. And I also picked up playing the drums while I was in high school, and I picked up the clarinet, just picked up several instruments, and I enjoyed it.
And so as a teenager, that's when you made your determination to become a musician, and you started working as a teenager.
Yes, I started working and I started learning how to play as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all kind of thing that, well, it was very popular in my school simply because we didn't have that many activities. We didn't have a football team. The only thing I remember is the basketball team, and I think we played basketball 12 months a year or 9 months a year. But and then the band, of course, we had a very, very good band compared to the kind of bands that we had during that time.
So when did you go into the service? Were you a teenager then, or was that later?
Well, I went into the service officially after college. I went from 1947, I left high school. And of course, during the time I was in high school, I got a chance to play with the Silas Green Band and some of the other bands traveling. It was kind of the minstrel show.
Right.
And
Silas Green was kind of a minstrel type show.
Silas Green from New Orleans.
Yes.
I don't know whether they were really from New Orleans, but that was just a slogan that we used.
Yeah.
But it was, that was the only way I could make any money. Mm-hmm. And when I say money, I mean, we were very limited with our resources and refunds, but we learned how to take what little we had and try to generate some funds from there.
Right. And now you ended up with that show. You came to the Morton Theater, is that correct?
Many years ago, I came with the Silas Green Band to the Morton Theater and to Athens. There was a lot of transitions going on during those days, and Mr. Wilbur Jones became one of the owners, one of the investors in the Silas Green Band. So I played up under his auspices for a while. But there were other people I didn't know, like there were other people from Athens I did not know that had some interest in it.
Mr. Wilbur Jones was from Athens?
Yes. I think he's from Atlanta, but he lived in Athens.
Mm-hmm. And so you don't remember what year? I know that was a long time ago.
It was back in the 47, 48. Yeah.
So it was later on. So, okay, so you went to college. Where'd you go to college? And then after college, you went into service?
Yes.
Okay.
At first I went to South Carolina State University. And we were promised some scholarships there, only to find out when we got there we didn't have any. That the band director who promised us these scholarships had left as we were coming in. He was leaving.
Oh.
So there was no record that we had any funds for us to go to school. So I stayed there for about a week, but I never attended any classes. And someone told us, it was about 6 or 7 of us, that Claflin College, the school next door, was looking for some musicians, and that we could take an audition and they would give us some help to go to school, because we had no money.
Right.
So we went over there and took the audition, and of course, it was very easy compared to with the high school band that we were in. So there was not any problem with the audition, and we received a scholarship there, and that's where I went to school.
Mm-hmm. And then after college, you went into the service?
After college, I went into the Army. Mm-hmm. And that was 1947 to 1951. I was in college from 47 to 51. Then it was during the Korean War. Mm-hmm. And I was drafted before I graduated, but they said, we'll put you on a deferment until you graduate. And within 1 week after you graduate, we'll be knocking on your door again. And I don't think they waited for about 2 or 3 days, and then I went into the service.
Right.
Of course, I had a MOS number for band, and I remained in the band in service for a while. And I did my training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and then we went to Kentucky, Louisville, Kentucky, Fort Knox, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. And I was in the band until I went to Korea.
Right.
When I got to Korea, there was a different reception. That they said the band is kind of an off-time thing. You have to be part-time band and part-time infantry. So I spent 18 months in Korea.
So, and you did play in Korea with Bob Hope.
I was with the Army band, the 8th Division band at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and it was the 36th Army band at Fort Knox, and then the 7th Division band in Korea. Now, we played, and we got a chance to do a lot of good things in the band, but whenever there was a big push or offense or things got a little hot, we had to use our rifles and do some other kinds of things in the military. But it was during the Korean War, and I could expect that during the war.
Right. So, how did Bob Hope come into the picture?
Oh, there were a lot of USO shows that would come to Korea. And Bob Hope was coming, and they needed some musicians to back up the show. And I was one of those musicians to do that out of the 7th Division band. Of course, in the military, I ran into a lot of wonderful musicians that I got a chance to play with. Like, there was Frank Foster, who became kind of a well-known arranger with the Basie band. And there were the two Adderley brothers. And we were all at Cannonball Adderley and Ned Adderley.
Right.
So,
now, also, wasn't it at that time that you found out about Athens, Georgia?
Yeah, we were playing one night with the Bob Hope show, and there was a young man who heard me play. I mean, he heard a lot of us play, but he asked me what was I going to do after the war. And I said, well, I'm going to take one step at a time. I'm going to get out of the Army, that's for sure. Then I'll find out, since I had a college degree before I went to the Army. And of course, he said, I know some people in Athens, Georgia. I learned later on that he was from Athens, Georgia, but he had written some people for me.
You remember his name?
No, but he was a friend of Mr. Sam Wood, who was the superintendent. Or his family knew that family. And I got a chance, of course, to have many wonderful days with Mr. Sam Wood later on.
Right. So let's talk about Mr. Wood. Mr. Wood was superintendent of the
Clark County
African-American
School District.
The whole district, or?
Well, that seemingly to me, it merged later on with the county and the city. There was the Union Institute, which was one of the schools in the county, and they all came together into one school system. But Sam Wood was the superintendent. Now, I'm not sure whether it was, well, I know it was the city schools. And that's how I got to know him.
And you said Mr. Wood had a lot to do with early integration efforts in.
Yes, he did. And he is probably, I can think of two people, and they were unsung heroes. Mr. Wood was one of those, because he saw it coming. Well, you know, there were people who resisted integration and felt, I guess, that the system could live without it. So he put himself on the line for a lot of people.
Do you remember what year that was? Was that when you
I
came?
came here in, I came in 53. I think that was about the 1970, when integration was coming.
Yes.
Freedom of choice and that kind of thing existed.
Yes.
And I had spent some 12 or 13 years as a band director at the Athens High and Industrial School. And the two schools in Athens was the Athens High and Industrial, which was the black high school, and the Athens High School, which was for the counter white school.
Right. And so you taught band and what else?
I taught music, general music.
Yes.
And all the students in 8th grade had to take general music, so I got a chance to know a lot of students, work with a lot of students.
Right.
But those were they were the days of before integration.
Yes.
And then during the days that integration was going to come in.
Yes.
Whether we wanted it or not. And I thought Sam Wood was one of the superintendents that made history because he stood up for what he believed.
Well, you told me a good story about when you were teaching your students to play Battle Hymn of the Republic. Was that at Bernie Harris?
Yeah, that was at Bernie Harris, and I had this football show, built around the theme of, I guess, patriotic type thing.
Uh-huh.
And we were on the field rehearsing Battle Hymn of the Republic. And Mr. Wood got several telephone calls that I had the band up there getting ready for a civil rights parade.
March.
On March.
Right. Some white citizens got concerned when they heard
got
you
very concerned.
playing Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Battle Hymn of the Republic. So when I walked off the field for a few minutes, and I gave the band a break, and I walked into my car to get something. Mr. Wood was sitting right next to my car. And he laughed and he said, "Sounds very good, Walter Allen." I said, "Well, thank you." But I did not know that he was called thinking that there was a civil rights march going to go on because of that.
Well, was it after that he sent you to Clark Central, or what was it
All right.
Clark Central then, or was it a different?
It was Athens High School when I went there,
which was the white
which was the white school.
high school, and
so
he
the
sent
Athens
you
High
there.
School became the Clark Central. The name was changed to Clark Central. And the Athens High and Industrial became the Bernie Harris High School
Yes.
in the name of a Mrs. Bernie, who taught a math teacher, and a Mr. Harris, who was a former principal years later.
Right. And so were you the first African American?
Well, Mr. Woods sent me over not as a band director, but as a assistant principal. So I guess I was the first black assistant principal in the school district. And I went to the Athens High School. It was still Athens High School when I became the assistant principal there.
Right.
Now that's in the early 70s.
Yes.
And that was when I, of course, got to work with so many students, black and white students.
Right.
And, I had a different feeling about integration than a lot of people because I never saw integration as that we should be fearful of anything. Because I never thought that students would get that upset about it, but it was the adults.
Yes.
And I'm not sure that all the administrators we had during that time was committed to integration. Because many of the problems we had in the school district were caused by professional people.
Could you talk a little bit about some of those problems that you remember?
The resentment, first, there was a march, but the students were getting together and wondering what was going on, because I don't think the administration ever called the students together and said, let's talk about integration, or let's talk about going into a new school. Black kids going to give up their school, white kids upset, they, might have to give up part of the things they had. So it was a matter of people being uninformed. And seemingly it was a dirty word to talk about, And there were people, attitudes and personalities flaring all over the place. But my position was what was right as opposed to what was wrong. I never saw anything else involved in it. And I made many friends from many white parents and black parents because of my position. Not that I was any superhero, but I just felt that we had an obligation to do what was right for the students. It said integration will come, whether we are there or not, whether we are around or not, and it was coming. And I thought you needed people who would be committed to help bringing it. But I learned very soon that we didn't have a lot of people who were really committed to bringing a smooth integration to the school district.
Now, by this time, did you have your doctorate? Because you went to UGA to get your doctorate. And was this at the time? Now, I know that Holmes and Hunter were here starting in 1961. And so when did you go to University of Georgia, and what was your experience there?
Very bad. Well, they just didn't really want us here. There weren't that many. I mean, there weren't enough blacks here to fill up a your car. Well, maybe 4 or 5 was around. Now Hamilton was around, and Charlene Hunter and
Mary Frances
Early
Early.
was here. And
Yeah.
I mean, I knew Hamilton and Charlene. I didn't ever meet Mary Frances. And I had a student that Mary Blackwell. She's not mentioned at all when it talks about integration in the school district. She's one of the first blacks from Athens who came here to school, along with a young man, Chester Davenport, in the law school. So there weren't that many. I had some teachers who were very, very helpful and really gave us good guidance, and there were some who could care less if we were here or weren't here. Of course, you could expect that. I did.
Did you get your doctorate in music or in education?
I did it in psychology. But I did a lot of courses in music too. I had a master's degree in music from Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio.
So do you remember what years you were up here on the campus? Do you remember about when that was?
I got to think back and think, when did Charlene and Hamilton come?
They came in 1961, I believe, and they were here until at least 1963. I know Mary Frances Early got her master's or graduate degree
for music.
For music, yeah. So I just wanted to, because I've heard a lot from people who were there around the time you were there, and they said that all of the original people who integrated the university had difficult times.
Yes.
But difficult times did not end with them. The difficult times lasted a long time.
Yes.
After they had left. And so it took the university a long time before it kind of accepted this idea that there was going to be integration. So would you agree with that?
Yes. Charlene and Hamilton were undergraduates. When I came here, I was a graduate student.
Yes.
And I don't really remember. There might have been 1 or 2 other blacks, but I can't remember who they were. But I didn't think that the early stage of it, we were not committed here. We weren't committed that we were going to make integration work. Or there were many people who were, but just like anything else, there were some who weren't.
Right. Well, what about African American leadership? Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
In Athens?
Yes. Was there?
There were some unsung heroes involved. I think the one student that provided more leadership than any other student was Nathaniel Fox. I got to know Nathaniel, and after school, I think he went to the military and he became paralyzed in a swimming pool incident. And he's in a wheelchair. But he actually was the one who led the students. And he was a natural born leader. But I worked with people who worked hard to get rid of him. They didn't want to see that leadership that he had. And they worked very hard in some of the schools I was in. You know, he was targeted as probably the troublemaker because he was speaking up for integration and doing some things he should do. But
and
he
you
was
said
not,
he even had threats from the Klan.
Sure, he did. Well, Sam Wood had threats from the Klan. He was the superintendent of schools, you know, and he did so many things, but seemingly, you know, the things he had to do was to get the community ready. And that was not an easy task. And to help try to get educators ready. Because I learned, if anything I really learned about it, is that there were many educators who weren't committed at all to integration. They were just as happy to see things the way they were. And I had to work with those people. And they all have a different philosophy of what you ought to be doing. And that's the way of Nathaniel Fox, and I think Sam Wood was that way. And I think the school district has really done an injustice by not naming a school or something after Sam Wood, because he really gave the type of leadership. Now, there might be people who would agree with me. That's okay. That's one thing good about America. We can disagree.
Yes.
And agree to disagree or agree to agree, but whatever. I thought the man really was sincere about getting people together and trying to work on some things. Because he said to me, I really didn't want to go when he called me in his office and asked me about going to Athens High School as an assistant principal.
Yeah.
You know, I had been here for years, and I had to go through the band director, and I worked with him. At that time, it was T.J. Burns, and we worked very closely together, but I couldn't see that the tone of things was ready for that, you know?
Yes.
And I'm not sure I was.
Yes.
I was, well.
Right. But you did it. And
Yeah.
what happened to Mr. Wood? Did he get another job? Was he
I think he retired.
He retired.
But he led the school district through some very critical days. You know, it was not the type of days that the kinds of things that other people who followed him had to do.
Right.
But he had already laid the groundwork, and if we had followed some of the things that he had laid for us, it would have been a much easier transition than it was.
So, looking back now and looking at where we are now, are you saying that we could have made?
We could have been a whole lot better, and we could have made it much easier. For an example, let's take Nat Fox. I could never see Nat Fox as being one of the destroyers of the school district. I saw him as a builder. But because he had influence, and because he was a leader among leaders, and the students followed him, they perceived him as being, you know, a Malcolm X in the school district. For an example, I remember when the movie played here of Malcolm X, and they had all kinds of workshops to help the students not go on a riot and all, and nobody was thinking about that movie. When it was over, it was just as calm as it had ever been before. You know, like it was a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
They expected something that did not come up.
Right. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I understand.
No.
Well, Mr. Fox is still living, right?
Yes, he's still living.
And in Athens?
He's living in Athens. And of course, if there is a person I know of now, Mr. Wood is deceased, but I think his daughter still lives here. They have named schools after everyone. I don't know. You know, I don't know what the criteria has been, but I don't see how anyone could name a school after anyone if Sam Wood hadn't had a school named after him during the early days of integration. And I don't see how any student, whoever they were, deserved more than Nat Fox. And of course, there were some white students who worked with him. They worked more as a unit, coming together, but he was sort of the witch, you know, how you perceive the devil and the witch. When we talked about Nat Fox, it was kind of like, oh, he's trouble, you know, he's this. I never found any of that. I found him to be very nice and calm to work with, but he spoke the truth. Somehow people don't like the truth. And doing integration, there were so many people who didn't like the truth at all. They didn't like anything that meant people coming together to work.
Now, I'd like to take it in a little bit different direction, but I understand that you did some work in the prison system, that you, there was a need there for some things for the prisoners and that you were involved in that effort. Could you talk a little bit about, I have here that you were instrumental in building a chapel and educational complex for inmates at the Athens Clarke County Correctional Institution. So could you talk a little bit about your work in that?
Yes, I was teaching a course with Dr. E. Paul Torrance, who was my advisor.
Mm-hmm.
And I started going out there to see what I could do to help improve some things. Not that it was a terrible situation, because after all, the guys were incarcerated, and you know, people don't want to see inmates living a better life than people in the free world living. You know, I call it the free world.
Yeah, I understand.
So, but there were some things, and I had talked with the warden, and who was Ed Greenaway, very open-minded man, and really wanted to see some good things happen. So I organized the students I had in a psychology class. And part of the things that we did, the class met at the institution. We met with the inmates. And from there, and I didn't think there'd be a better way to teach a course in learning how to teach and learning how to work with people, to work with those inmates, because to me that was an education within itself. To me it was. So I got busy, and we didn't have some facilities at all. We didn't have a chapel. We didn't have a place for classrooms. We all met inside a little components that they had. So the warden and I talked about trying to raise some money, because I didn't foresee that the state or the county was going to put any money with it, and they didn't. So I got out, and we organized some people, and I went to different churches and went and met with different people. And I met with a company, and they donated a bus. And that bus was to carry the inmates from the facility to the Votech school and different places, that they could learn something while in prison, that they could come back as productive citizens. Now, that was the whole idea of it with me. And of course, the students got a chance to teach those inmates. We practiced on working with them, and we learned so many wonderful things about them. You know, I guess we could understand, like some students coming from different places didn't quite understand inmates and felt very nervous around them. But we learned to feel that we could work with them, and they responded very well, and we were able to raise the money, and the inmates produced the labor.
Mm-hmm.
They built the chapel in the school.
Really?
And I went out to raise the money, along with Ed Greenaway and Mrs. Jackie Raines, and there were 4 or 5 of us, and a few ministers joined in to help us. And it took a while, but we were able to raise the money. And of course, there were many places who donated certain things, like Dalton, Georgia donated some carpeting for the floor, and there were different companies donated flooring to build it. But all of the labor was by the inmates, so we didn't have the labor to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
But we did build it, and the chapel in the school is still there.
Oh, where is it located?
Okay. I'll be happy to take you out there. I'll arrange that you'll be our number 1 guest, the 2 of you. It's on the Lexington Highway.
Oh,
a little before
they
you
have
get,
the
you know, where the
jail
auto
now?
tag office.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little before you get there.
Oh.
And there is a little shopping center to the right. You make a left turn there, and you go right into the main campus. And there you will find the school still there in the chapel.
That's great.
You're still using it.
And wow. And when did you start that or project?
It took us a long time. It took us 5 or 6 years.
Uh-huh.
There were reasons, enough money to do it.
Yeah.
But we did.
Well, it was all privately funded, right?
Yeah. And the state did not have any money in it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Governor Busby was happy about that, and they gave us some awards for the city of Athens in having the first complex completely built by money raised.
That's great.
People still dodge me when they see me come in thinking I'm begging to build a chapel. I said, it's finished. We finished a long time ago, you know.
Right. But so another thing I wanted to talk about also, when we moved here, my husband and I, we listened to your radio show. And one day you played one of my favorites, Rhapsody in Blue. You played the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, the object of the program was to educate in a sense. You played different things, but you played a lot of different kinds of music so that people would learn something. It kind of reminded me of music appreciation class in
That's
a
exactly
sense.
what it was designed for, an appreciation for the community. We, Dr. Brown, Bradford Brown, was the owner of the station. And he and I sat down and talked about some programs we could do to sort of focus on the community. So we came up with a jazz hour and a classical hour. so,
Yes.
so one would follow the other. The jazz was first, and then the classical would follow the jazz. It was 2 hours, 1 hour each. And I would take a different composer every week and bring the music of that person for the community. And, well, it did generate a lot of interest, you know.
Yeah. Do you remember what years you did that? And this was this station is no longer here. It was I remember WBKZ
Right.
AM 88 WBKZ. So
Well, I did it for 4 or 5 years.
right.
Uh,
Do you remember? I know it was in the 90s because
there is some interest
I
now
heard
in
the
some people
program.
in bringing that station back. I hope they can get it back.
yeah, they had a fire and
Yes,
a
yes.
few years ago, and they said they were going to come back after the fire, but they never did. Yeah. So, yeah, that was a very, very fine program.
I talked with Dr. Brown just a few weeks ago, and he is interested in hoping that he can get some things going to bring it back. I hope so. I volunteered. Most of the things I've done in this community, I've never gotten any pay, so I didn't wait for money. So that was one of the things, but it really was like a music appreciation hour for the people.
Right.
And I loved it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, from 1953 until today, you've been educating people in several different areas.
Well, the most rewarding thing, well, one of the rewarding things I've done, that you talked about a program you went to. Well, we had a collection of about 150 students I had sent from Athens on music scholarships all throughout this state and other states. That was one of the big rewards of my life. And these students, many of them now have doctorate degrees, and some of them are teaching music in different schools and universities.
And that was probably raised money also for, I know that there's a,
Okay, the students organized, there was a Dr. Moses Turner who sort of was instrumental in starting this thing, and they all got together and wanted to honor something in my name or some kind of tribute to me. And then they came up with the number of students I had sent to various colleges and universities. And often I had to get out of my, kids I would take to college sometimes, and they wouldn't have enough money to get in.
Right.
Or I got music scholarships for them.
right.
And I had spent, I guess my family understood, so we were all poor. And I had no problems with that because I was
Right, you have
born in
two-
a poor family.
Right. You have two sons, Walter Allen Jr., who is the editor of Zebra magazine,
That's right.
and your other son's name?
I have 3 sons.
3 sons, sorry.
I have one son who is a professor in the business school at Boston University.
And his name?
That's Jeffrey. And I have Brian, who is working with helping students get scholarships. Kaplan Educational Testing Company. He's been working with them. So Walter and Brian are still here, and Jeffrey is in Boston.
And yeah, and your late wife, I met her many years
Yes.
ago. She passed away
Yes.
quite a while ago. Yeah, yeah. So I think, have I touched upon,
Oh, I need to tell you
is there
about Africa.
something? Oh, okay,
Yeah.
go ahead, go with Africa.
I was sitting down after I retired. Before I retired, I went to the Medical College of Georgia and became the associate director of the Sickle Cell Anemia Center. And that was a good experience. I knew so little about sickle cell anemia. I didn't even know it was a predominantly black disease until then. But I learned that was a real education. But I was but I was sitting down one day thinking about some things I could do after I retired. And I saw an article in a book that said Teachers for Africa Wanted. And that was called the IFISH, International Foundation of Education and Self-Help. It was started by Dr. Leon Sullivan.
Oh, the
Yeah.
Sullivan Principles.
Right, the Sullivan Principles. Right. And I said, this sounds like something I would like to do. And I wrote a letter to them expressing my interest in coming to Africa to teach. That's after about 30-something years in the school district here.
Right. When did you retire? What year was that?
I'm not going to tell you that. I haven't. I'm going to
Okay.
keep on working.
All right.
But I left the school district and went to the medical college, and I came back, and that was after 32 years I was here. Then I went to the medical college and stayed 2 years. Then I came back and worked. There was a superintendent here wanted me to do some things in the school district, and I worked in the school district part-time. But I was not satisfied. I wanted to go, and I said, Africa, well, I applied. And one day I got a call from Dr. Sullivan's daughter, Judy Sullivan, Julia Sullivan. And she said, Walter Allen, would you still like to go to Africa? And I said, come on, I applied for this. You can't be talking about something I applied for 6 months ago. I hadn't heard a word from y'all. She said, well, it took us that long to kind of get the things going that we wanted to get going, but we have chosen you as one to go to Africa to work. Well, the salary, there was no salary. There was a stipend of about $600 a month. But they paid your way there and back home.
Yes.
So she said, you will have to come to a workshop for 2 weeks and learn some things about going to Africa. And if you still want to go, we'll send you. And if you change your mind, we won't be angry with you. We'll understand. I said, hey, that sounds like a good deal to me. So I went to the workshop, and for 2 weeks they drilled us on living in Africa and being able to work with African teachers and these other kinds of things that we would encounter going to Africa. And at the end of the 2 weeks training, she said, if you don't want to go, or any of you who don't want to go, there were about 125 of us all over the United States. And she said, now, if you don't want to go, do us a favor. Just don't go and waste our money and stay a week or two and want to come back home. So drop out now, and we won't be angry with you. You won't owe us any of the money back we've spent on you. Just, let's take off and go back home and do what you like to do. So I said, no, I'm going. And I went to Africa. And that was, I believe, in 1990. 1990. And I have been going every year since then.
Right, to Kenya.
Yeah, I went to Nairobi, Kenya, and for the first year, for the first 2 or 3 months I was there, I went out to the Boomsdock where they sent us and didn't have a radio or television, just there as a person and trying to do some work with the African teachers. And I made so many friends there. I have met so many good people in Africa. And I knew very little about Africa. And actually, I don't remember anything in high school that we had that prepared me to go live with Africans and work with Africans. But that workshop and that program, it was called IFESH, International Foundation of Education and Self-Help. And I went there and worked at the United States, that was assigned to the United States International University, which is a private university. I mean, the first year I was assigned there, I guess we had no more than about 600 or 700 students. Now it's 5,000 students there in school. And how much it has built up under the leadership of Dr. Freda Giles from Missouri, outstanding administrator. But the people there were so wonderful to work with that I fell in love with it. And since then, I have done some work in Rwanda and all over East Africa and pretty well known in East Africa.
Right. And don't you also help to get musical instruments over to them?
Yeah, that's been a Herculean task, but I've tried that. That helped some.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I will tell you something that's a little hilarious, but I was determined I was going to have a band the first year in Africa. Well, when I went there, nobody told me that that African students didn't have musical instruments to play on. But I put a big announcement up on the bulletin board and asked all the students who played an instrument to come out, and I'm organizing a band. And I must have had about 16 people showed up the next day with 16 drums, and they all were women.
All right.
I said, this is the drum and bugle corps.
Women play.
I
Yeah.
cannot have
Women
a band
power.
with 16
16
drummers.
women drummers.
Women drummers. But there was 16, and we decided that it would be a lot better to have a chorus. So they'll have their own built-in instrument, and we wouldn't have to worry about trying to get hold of instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And we organized it into a chorus, and I've been doing that for the last 20 years off and on.
Right. Right. Well, I guess you would describe your experience as very varied. You've had a lot of different kinds of experiences.
I've learned so much from the things I've done.
Right.
From the good things and the bad things. From the mistakes I've made to the successes that I encountered.
Well, is there anything that I haven't touched upon that you'd like to mention? Any major events in your career that I haven't?
Yes, some money for the
money?
African students for their scholarships.
Uh-huh.
All the years that I have taught in Africa, I have not received a single salary, nothing.
Mm.
Whatever they paid me, I gave it back to the university for scholarships to help the kids.
Mm.
So there have been hundreds of students who have gone through on the little help that I could give them. We're still trying to. Last year I set up an endowment because I know I can't keep going back as I get older.
Yeah.
So I set up an endowment in my mother and father's name. And hopefully in the next 2 years I will raise the $10,000 I would need. I already got close to $5,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not asking for any contributions. If anybody want to help, fine. But it's to set up some things for African students that they will get an education or at least have a chance to get an education.
Yes.
So I've done that, and I'm
Right.
still doing that.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure that I'm going back this summer or not, but hopefully I will.
Mm-hmm. Well, is there anything else that you would like to say in regard to Athens, integration, any of that subject that I may have missed?
Well, we're not going back to segregation in the schools anymore. I hope not.
Mm-hmm.
I hope we can have a one school district. I hope we can build on the mistakes that we have made and build on the good things that we did. And I'm not saying that everyone didn't, I'm not saying that all weren't committed, but there were too many who weren't totally committed. And that caused problems for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I've learned that people are people. We all have basically one head and two eyes. And why I get upset about some things that we all differ on some things, It's kind of like putting the animals in the school, and you can't expect the birds, they got an A in flying, but they flunk running, Mm-hmm. The monkeys got an A in climbing trees, and they flunk swimming. So we all can learn from the mistakes we have made. We don't need to go back into history, I take a lot of pride in the university kids now that I see here and work with, and I work with a lot of kids in my fraternity because it's so different now. When I came here at the University of Georgia, this was not you would find, if you didn't see a black person cleaning the floors, you wouldn't see one.
Mm.
I remember Dr. Torres, who, gosh, I was so much of that man, but he gave me the first job I had teaching here. And he kind of prepared me. Of course, I've always been prepared for things like this because the military prepared me for a lot of things, and the good days prepared me, and we were, I did not know we were poor until I went to school. If I had never gone to school, I would have always thought I was a rich kid. But I learned very well, very quickly in school that there's the haves and the have-nots, you know, the advantage and the disadvantage, the disenfranchised. I learned that very early in school because the environment taught us that. And it didn't have to be through integration. That was in black schools. Some kids had, some kids did not. So I would like to see us continue working. I like to see my university here, University of Georgia, continue doing the things to uplift people and bringing people from the different parts of the world here to work. And that would be influential in the community, the black community and the white community, or let's just say the community. Because for a long time, I didn't think anything at the University of Georgia touched much of the black community. You know, I can remember when the coach in the high school, Coach Holmes and I, would come over here and pick up uniforms that Coach Dooley would give us. And we didn't have any if we didn't have those. And I remember I went to him about the prison system, and I needed uniforms for we had believe it or not, we had a football team in the prison system here, touch flag football. But we were dressed, and people sometimes thought we were the University of Georgia. But you have to work together and having an appreciation for one another. I don't ever want to go back through the days of integration in the school district where people saying, you know, that's the way I felt as a black educator. I felt that way, you know, because I had many people say, Walter Allen is part of the problem. He's not part of the solution. But I've always wanted to be a part of the solution. And many times I was part of the problem because I could never get to the solutions. I couldn't find people who wanted to work with me as part of the solutions.
Well, that's a great summation. Now, the last question is there anything I've missed concerning your career in music that you'd like to touch upon?
Music delivered me from the cotton fields of South Carolina to where I am now. As a young kid, my mother would pack a lunch for my two sisters and myself. Out of 12 kids in the family, most of them died before I was born, so I still don't know all of my brothers and sisters.
Right.
But she would send us, the big trucks would come through the community, and we would get on these big trucks on the back, sit on the floor of the trucks, and take off to go pick cotton. 50 cents a pound. If you picked, 50 cents a 100.
50 cents for 100 pounds?
Yeah.
Good grief.
And that was the only little income I had until I started learning something about music, because I said, hey, I can't do this. I didn't like picking cotton. Some people did, I didn't. And there were people who could pick 500 and 600 pounds. I was struggling all day and get 50 pounds. You know? Yeah. Well, if it's 50 cents a 100, you know what I may be picking 50 pounds of cotton.
Right.
But that was the only income that we had. And my mother prepared us every morning to go. And my two sisters and I got on this big truck that would come through the community, and we would go. We'd be part of that. And of course, I saw, that's where I first paid attention to injustices. I used to watch the guy weighing the cotton up, you know. Sometimes I'd follow him right on down through weighing everybody cotton up. And nobody really knew what they picked. He gave them whatever he wanted to. That's why I never got over 50 pounds. I said, my gosh, he's taking 50 pounds away from me. But what can you do? You have nothing.
Right.
You know? So I've learned that, you know, I've said to my children, hey, I want things better for you. But you got to stand up and fight for some things you want. You just can't sit down and think people are going to hand it to you.
Right.
So I became a fighter, maybe different from what you have to fight now, because we had to survive. And of course that, but I love people, and you know, I was very happy when my students said, hey, we want to recognize you. We want you to come back, because I have not seeked any recognition.
Well, that was a wonderful event, and I just want to say the students at the event, they played music,
Yes.
and some of them
The kids I had taught.
right, who you had taught played music, and it was a wonderful, wonderful room full of people with a lot of warmth and to express their gratitude and love for you. So,
Oh, I tell you something that I'm trying to do, and I'm getting some help. I have an exchange program going with colleges and universities to the African university where I teach in Africa. There are about 40 or 50 different nationalities of students at the University in Africa. Because I've learned that all, and they are all African students, there are other kinds of students there. But I'm trying hard to get more colleges to participate. You pay your tuition here, or whatever the school is in America, and then you go to Africa for 1 semester, and you study there at the university, and then some students from there will come here and study. Now, it's been going along very well, but I don't have enough schools that's really participating. And I have been extremely not surprised, but working with black colleges, trying to get them to participate in this. I've not been successful in any schools in Georgia, and I have been to Fort Valley and Savannah State and Albany State and all the other schools. We have some in South Carolina participating. Claflin College was one of the first schools to participate in it. But it's an exchange program, and the money you pay at your school will take you through the program for that semester. In other words, you don't pay any money to the school you're going to, you pay the money to the school you're leaving for a semester, which makes it easier to get there. But I have had so many students from Africa who have been here. Even they came, several students came to the program they had for me,
yes.
Yeah. But some of them are already here in the schools as an exchange student. But it's a growing program, and larger schools have had this for a long, long time. I realize that a lot of black colleges have not had this type of program, but it's worth it. It's really worth it. I don't want to wait till they have to get 40 or 50 years old like I was before I ever saw Africa. I would, like most uneducated people, everybody thought, Cheetah and Tarzan and Jane were still around.
Right.
I didn't realize that they had street
Big
cars
cities.
and high-rise buildings and all these kinds of things,
Right.
So let's all get together and build for the future. Never let segregation come back. Any form of segregation, as far as I'm concerned, is bad.
Well, I think that's a good way to wrap what we have to say today. And I want to just sincerely thank you for giving us your time and giving us so much more knowledge.
I should thank the two of you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Al.
Thank you.
Sorry if I ask a couple questions?
Yes, sir.
So I'm curious about your first days as a working musician, and what that was like to actually, how old were you when you first started making money, and just sort of the experience of being able to be a black working musician during this period, and what it was like to travel around, and what your experience was in that.
Thank you. That's a good question. I overlooked that. We lived in storefront hotels, what they would probably call homes, more so than a motel or hotel. It was a separate type thing. It was still segregation. We didn't get to play in the better places, but we played in some places that I probably would have never gotten to if I had not been a musician.
Well, you told me a story about what you earned per week playing with Silas Green,
Yeah,
and that
$20 a week.
right, and that you got an extra $5 for driving the bus,
The truck.
and then sometimes you all slept on the bus,
Yes.
or slept in the theater, or
It was a tough life because facilities just weren't open to you. So we had problems with, it was no problem to us because we knew before we got to the town that we had to sleep in motels. Well, mostly homes, not motels, just homes
People's
where people would take
houses.
us in. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard of the Green Book? That was a directory that was during the 1950s. A man had published a directory, so when you went to a town in the South, you would know if they had facilities where you
I
could
heard
live
of
at.
it. Mhm.
Yeah.
That was very helpful to a lot of musicians
Mm-hmm.
because you wouldn't go to a place that you couldn't, that they aren't going
Find
to
a
take you in any
place to
place.
stay. Right.
Yes, sir.
Was there collaboration with white musicians when you're on the road, or I mean, what was
You know-
what was that dynamic?
In
Right.
spite of rules and regulations, we played with a lot of white musicians who would come where we were playing and sit in with us. So we did get a chance to play with white musicians. Yeah.
What can you describe for us, like what it's like to be in that kind of a band, or with Silas Green or the Minstrel Show, or like what is I think a lot of people wouldn't, that's now would be unfamiliar with that. So what's a night like?
What's a typical night is like?
Like that, yeah.
Okay,
Right.
Silas Green was really a tent show.
Mm-hmm.
They had big tents set up, and people would come, and they'd have a collection at the door, and we would have comedians.
Mm-hmm.
Two I can remember is Silas and Lilas. And these two people would tell fantastic jokes, unrehearsed. You're talking about ad-libbing, it's strictly ad-libbing. And then they had Imp and Blimp. They were the characters in the show. And you would start off in the conversation like, man, where were your mother last night when things were going on? Why weren't you with her? I mean, it would be this type of thing that could start. It was totally unrehearsed, and nobody knew what they were going to say until they got out on the stage. But the band had to put some music with what they said. And sometimes it was awful, but sometimes it was great. It was very creative. I learned from E. Paul Torrance about creativity, and we did that in the Silas Green Band.
Did they wear the makeup?
Oh, yes.
The
Blacks had
blackface?
the stuff on their faces, and you could tell. If you look close enough, you could tell. And we had the makeup, not the band.
Yeah,
the band
but
was kind of
the
an independent little
perform-
thing.
right.
We played, but after the show, we played dances. Most people would say, okay, the Silas Green Dance Band is going to play tonight. So that's how we got a chance to make a little extra money.
Mm-hmm.
But for the show and all, we got like maybe $20 a week, $15 a week, this kind of thing. Not very much.
So
But
if
you
you
got a chance to
came,
travel.
if you came to Athens, would you come for one night, a couple nights, and then go on to the
Sometimes
next?
2 and 3 nights.
Right, and then you go to the next place.
Yeah. And it was open for blacks and whites. It had a little roped section.
Oh,
Like we were roped off for the theaters, they were roped off for the show. So it was that kind of thing, and
wow.
we all had fun playing. And we had a couple of white musicians who came along and joined the band for a while. Most of them didn't like. I mean, most people didn't like the lifestyle. The playing was fine, but the living was bad.
So what kinds of tunes would you play for the show? I mean, were you just somebody call out a key and
All
someone
right.
would improv off of a riff, or how does
You're a musician,
how does-
aren't you?
Yes. How does one?
Okay.
How does one back up a show like
All right,
that?
let's take
improving?
the tune. Now you didn't have a lot of the progressive jazz, but some of it came out of that stuff. Okay, you can take any tune and play it. You can take When the Saints Go Marching In as I can play it as a church hymn, Lord, 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 Lord. Then I can play da 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 okay. That would be the bop, right? The progressive jazz. So we would start, the guy was, okay, we play it as a riff starting off. Dun, 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 dun. That's the boom one. Dun, 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 da, da, ba, da, 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 do, 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 do. Changing the style. Now blues. Do, dip. Do, 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 do. Back to the Saints Go Marching In type thing. Do, 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 do. So we would start riffs. Nobody knew what riff. We just some guy might say, "Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun," but you will know it's a format that you're following. And we did that kind of thing. We didn't read any music. Didn't have any to read most times.
Improvisation.
But the show was interesting. Trumpet players who could play high. It's okay on clarinets and all these, but you know, you had to be heard in a tent show, you know. Okay.
That's fascinating.
That sound familiar?
Oh, it's fascinating.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it's absolutely, yeah, thank you.
And I do that now. I mean, people still do that with playing, you know. A riff of the blues. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Da 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 does in the night. We pick it up, go on with it. You know, and sometimes nobody knew we were going to end it, and we got tired. You say, dun 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 dun. You know, a certain amount of measures. That was unheard of. You know.
Oh, thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Allen.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really had to be able to improvise, and
Right, improvise.
whatever key it was what it was, and there you went.
Well, you had about two main keys, B flat and F. You had some others, but most guys going to play in those two keys.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, sir.